Biden, Hunter, pardon. Yes, that is this breaking story, but it's Ana Navarro's thoughtful commentary on it. That is the breaking story. If you don't know who Ana is, she's a former Republican out of Florida who is contributor to CNN and also now one of the hosts on The View. And the reason why I'm going to do this a little different than normal, I want you to get the full scope of Ana's commentary with regards to this pardon, because this conversation now is going to go on for at least 4 years. The hypocrisy that's going to come out of the Republican camp during Donald Trump's presidency is not ever going to let this go. Both the hypocrisy of all the criminals, severe criminals that he pardoned, along with Joe Biden, who said he wasn't going to pardon him, and now that the election has been lost, has decided to do such. This conversation is not going to go away. It's also not going to go away in terms of every politician and too many Americans believing that obviously there is a massive difference between the executive branch of justice and the power it allows, as well as the rest of the justice for the rest of the country, setting aside ethnicity. But false equivalency, those two words, are at the core heart of this story. And I wanted to make sure that I gave you the full chance to hear all of what she had to say immediately. So take a listen. I'll be back in just a second. Ana Navarro.
Yesterday, Biden had a change of heart, granting his son a full pardon on tax evasion and federal gun charges. He released a statement that, quote, says no reasonable person who looks at the facts can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out because he is my son. That is wrong, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. So the question is, will people understand?
Some of you know this, but I grew up with an immediate family member who was in and out of jail for addiction-related offenses when I was growing up. And now, a decade later, clean, have their life together, serve their time, are still dealing with the consequences. Inability to vote at time, paying restitution, working to get your record expunged, not being able to be eligible for certain employment. Most Americans, if they face consequences for actions that they took, they're going to have to face them, and nobody powerful and politically connected is going to come sweep in and save them. And I think, this feeds the notion to a lot of this country that there's simply a different set of rules for folks in power. And when we sit here and we say a lot like...
Let me let Ana speak.
I actually talked to Joe Biden about this. When he was on the show, I told him I hoped he pardoned Hunter.
I remember.
You did, I remember.
I went to speak at the Biden Institute in Delaware like a month later, and we talked on the phone, and I told him I hoped he pardoned Hunter. I left him a handwritten note at his desk at the University of Delaware and told him I hoped he pardoned Hunter.
Well, Donald Trump did X, Y, and Z, and how did he get elected? Because to a lot of this country, it just becomes noise. They think that if you commit crimes and somebody powerful and connected in D.C., right, left, center, Biden, Trump, you're going to be able to get away with it if you have someone on your side, and that's not how it is for everyday folks. Secondly, I take issue with lying about it. I wanted to ask him here when he came on The View, but the thought was he said so many times he wasn't going to pardon him. That, to me, is lying to the public. I felt bad for Karine Jean-Pierre that she repeatedly had to say that he wasn't going to pardon him. This is why people don't trust Washington. That's why they don't trust politicians. And I know a lot of us like Joe Biden, but I find it disappointing and bad for our institutions.
Well, look, I think sometimes, unfortunately, in this country, there are two sets of justice. He's nominating Charles Kushner, who he pardoned, as you mentioned, as the ambassador to France.
I respect it as a parent. I understand why he would do it. Yeah. But I wanted to understand why lie about it for so long.
I'd stop calling it a lie.
Okay, why repeatedly say you're not going to and you do? And secondarily, for the part of this country, half of it that doesn't support Biden, doesn't know him personally, doesn't get to have phone calls, and they're just looking at a system that seems like it's only benefits the people who are in power. What precedent does that set?
Well, here's what it sets. It's a precedent for all of us to open our eyes because we've elected someone who is in a similar situation, who didn't have a drug problem, who knew what he was doing, who clearly stood and said, I can do this. And he did it. So I think, for many, many reasons, this is very different than any other situation that we have ever dealt with, because when we're talking about who gets a pardon and who doesn't get a pardon, this man, I think Biden had no intentions of pardoning Hunter. And I think the more stuff that went down, I think he said, well, why am I busting my behind to stay straight and do this when nobody else is, when no one else is doing it?
I think he thought he was going to win, and I just wish he would.
And the reason I thought it was important is because I wanted him to hear from people who support him and respect him, which I do, that some of us, I'd say most of us, think it's okay for him to pardon Hunter because of what you just said, that so many of the people who committed this crime do not get prosecuted. Imagine the guilt that Joe Biden has to live with, thinking that his son, his only surviving son, is getting prosecuted because he is his son. I want to say that Charlie Kushner, the guy, Jared's dad, who was pardoned by Trump, he was convicted of witness tampering, among many other things. And Chris Christie, Republican, who prosecuted him at the time, said it was one of the most loathsome, disgusting crimes he prosecuted in more than a decade. Look, he hired a hooker, set up his his brother-in-law with the hooker, and sent the photos to his sister to intimidate her into not testifying. I'll say this. Hunter, your dad has given you a great, great gift. The gift of freedom and taking this weight off your shoulders.
Yeah.
I hope now Hunter gives his dad a gift. The gift of being a good son, a good father, a good grandfather, a good human being, leading a productive life. Can I finish? Mm-hmm. And staying clean for the rest of his life. So I hope that this goes both ways. He said he wasn't going to pardon him even after he lost, but I think what happened in the meantime that we have to be cognizant of is that Donald Trump campaigned on retribution, vindictiveness, and vengeance.
He's done it for 4 years.
He has appointed people who to law enforcement positions that have said we are here for retribution and vindictiveness. So Joe Biden could not leave Hunter, his only son, at the mercy of these people who are saying they're going to take retribution.
The aftermath of this conversation is not about, to me, whether or not you would have done this as the sitting president for your child. I tragically believe that based on what Hunter was actually convicted for, I believe that 99.9% of people who are the sitting president would probably pardon their child. That's not what it is. And the perspective that I think has to come with what Ana Navarro said is the place we're going to have to come from. We make too many things extreme black or extreme white in this country, and it's just not the case. And I don't mean ethnicity, I just mean black and white. Things are not like that with human beings. There is a lot more nuance to both the law and nuance to life. And that's why, to me, what comes out of this and what we need to focus on that comes out of this is the perspective of how our executive branch, all three branches of our government, function. And get away from trying to make everything a simple false equivalency or a simple whataboutism. Because if you have more than one child, then you damn well know perspective and nuance is imperative. And just because one kid does one thing, it doesn't alleviate the other one from what they do. So whataboutism is a real problem. Stay focused, stay clear, and as always, stay frosty.